This is my first EuroPython, and this is my first time as a speaker at EuroPython. I think I've been in some local events. Definitely the audience is smaller than this one. Thanks so much for coming. I guess it's because I have the LLM word in the title of my talk, and everyone is talking about LLMs. Well, let me introduce myself a little bit. My name is Jenny. I'm a software engineer, but I've been working as ML engineer for 5 years. Actually, I'm Peruvian, so I moved to the UK in 2022. I started working as solutions architect. Bear with me. I'm telling you just this because this will make sense on how I made my way into mechanistic interpretability. And for the last 2 years and a half, when I was working as solutions architect, which is a very interesting role for someone that is technical, because basically you are kind of a consultant for many companies. So when I was working in a company, I got a customer asking for how do I make sure my application that is using an LLM doesn't make up anything that is not really useful or understandable for my customer. They were a telecom company. So basically they had a chatbot and they integrated OpenAI and many other LLMs into their solution. And they wanted to make sure, of course, the LLM doesn't hallucinate. And when I was working in this project, I realized that we have already many solutions or many tools for interpretability of traditional machine learning models, like classifiers or regression models. So if you have some background in machine learning, you probably have heard about the SHAP or LIME. But at that time in 2022, end of 2022, beginning of 2023, there wasn't any actual solution for LLMs. So that's how I found mechanistic interpretability. The last year I've been working in ML platform, which is basically how do we make sure researchers and scientists can train and run inference at large scale. And I've been working as a researcher, independent research in mechanistic interpretability. Also, a very important fact about me is that I'm a cat lover, so you probably will see some examples and pictures of cats in my presentation. So this is just an example of a simple prompt in ChatGPT. The first sentence, or the first request is complete the sentence. When Mary and John went to the store, John gave a drink too. So for us, it's pretty simple to just complete the sentence with Mary, because of course we know who the noun is. But if we change the order of these the actors in this sentence, for ChatGPT now it's feasible to do this. But if you try this with a GPT-2 model or before, you will see not John but Mary again. And that's because models before couldn't understand when a noun or a verb, what was the purpose of these subjects in a sentence. So how does OpenAI models or Gemini or Claude models know about the structure of a sentence, when the next word to predict should be a verb or should be a noun or any other action, for example? So that's an open question. The second open question is, how does it do that? So last year, Anthropic researchers were mapping the inner workings of Claude 3. Probably you have used Claude as well. I guess everyone is using at the same time Gemini, ChatGPT, and Claude to see which one provides the best response. So if you use Anthropic or Claude last year in May, you probably have found this example somewhere. So when researchers were studying Claude 3 to understand how it works behind the scenes, they found one specific feature that was related to the Golden Gate Bridge. So what the researchers did, they amplify the power of this feature through code, of course. And what they got is a Claude version that was basically speeding Golden Gate Bridge all over the text. Well, for every request you got in May 30 last year, if you did that, you should have gotten a response like this. So this was an experiment run by Anthropic just to demonstrate the power of neurons in mechanistic interpretability, of course, and in LLMs. So this is part of the superpower you get if you understand what mechanistic interpretability is and how to manipulate neural networks. So what is mechanistic interpretability? I've showed you two examples. The first one is, how does the LLM know what's the next word to predict? And the second is, how can we modify the behavior of a specific network in a specific layer for LLMs? So mechanistic interpretability is actually asking this big question. How does a neural network actually think? We already know, and we have seen that LLMs like GPT-4 or any other LLM can generate highly fluent text. But when they solve math problems or they just follow instructions, well, we often treat them like black boxes. So that's where mechanistic interpretability comes in. So think about mechanistic interpretability as an MRI scan or an electrode recording. You are not just watching behavior, but you are looking under the hood to see what circuits are doing. So with this research with mechanistic interpretability, we're doing that, but with artificial neurons or layers. The goal of this field is to reverse engineer, basically, specific behaviors inside the model. So we want to find things like grammar tracking, factual retrieval, or even how harmful jailbreaks happen. That's one of the goals of this domain. So again, why not just using SHAP or LIME as we did with traditional machine learning models with classifiers and regressors? Why not just use these tools that already exist? If you have used them, then you might know that they are correlative, not causal. So they are actually showing you how a specific feature influences in the end prediction, right? So they are not providing you the reasons, but just it's basically, if you see it, SHAP is just correlation. So what we want to do here is to understand which neuron is actually responsible for certain behaviors in the response of an LLM. So before going through the tools, because as I promised in the outline or the description of this talk, I will give you some tools to start with this area. Before going through that, I think it's important to mention something that you probably have seen several times already in many courses of AI or LLMs. What is a transformer? I'm not going to go through all the steps, of course. I'm going to summarize a bit here. And we can just start saying that a transformer is a deep learning model. It was introduced in 2017, 5 years before ChatGPT. And it was created to handling sequential data like text, language, code, music, even DNA. So what was before transformer? Well, if you remember in your course in Coursera or any other deep learning AI course, they will mention RNNs, recurrent neural networks, or LSTMs. But they were processing one token at a time. With transformers, we have the power to see the entire sequence at once. So that's one thing to remember. But the core feature in a transformer is something called self-attention. And attention is basically how a word learns to pay attention to every word in an input text. These transformers are, of course, the building blocks for any LLM we use outside or through any platform. I promise I will show you cat pictures. So the most important part of a transformer is actual actually their function. So what is a transformer doing? Let's summarize this in just 3 steps. I think you can just remember the little formula I put at the bottom, but it's very simple. Let's say we have just 3 steps inside a transformer architecture. The first step is the tokenization part. For this sentence, the cat sat, the model breaks down this sentence into 3 tokens. The cat sat. Don't pay attention to, this feature is new. Don't pay attention to this G and other G here. Just consider these as tokens. So what happened after we got the tokens? These tokens are turned into vectors. Everything in machine learning needs to be a number, right? So we don't deal with actual text, but with numbers. So these tokens will be converted into vectors, and that's thanks to this famous lookup table called the embedding matrix. In the second step, we got a transformer processing this vector through multiple layers, and each layer is composed by a self-attention mechanism and MLP, or a feed-forward network. You will see this architecture. This is actually the architecture from the paper, but in the next slide, I will show you like a more accurate architecture. This was the first design of a transformer in 2017. So again, each layer in a transformer has 2 components. The self-attention mechanism is basically the mechanism that lets a token see many other tokens. And the feed-forward network, or the MLP, is the one that is processing each token independently. It's learning the meaning of each token in a sentence. So how many times we will see these blocks being repeated in a transformer? It actually depends on the model size. So it could be 12, 24, or even 96 layers, depending on how big is the model. And each layer is actually refining the understanding of each token. So in the first layer, I might be learning the position of every word. But in the next layer, I will be learning the meaning of it and how each word is related to not just the next one, but the next sentence, maybe. What do we get at the end? The next token prediction. So we don't just get one word, but we actually get a distribution over all the vocabulary tokens. So of course, then we order this vector, and we get the token with the highest probability of being the next token. So this is what a transformer is doing, but the most important part for mechanistic interpretability is actually what's happening inside just one layer. Mechanistic interpretability is about analyzing every layer, potentially every neuron in that layer. So if we zoom in on what's actually happening inside one layer of a transformer, this is a picture taken from Anthropic paper. And in each layer, again, remember, we have 2 big components: attention and the MLP, or the feed-forward network. So attention, again, will allow each token to ask, which other tokens should I care about? It will learn these patterns from data, of course. And again, if we remember the previous sentence, the cat sat, if I add more text to the sentence, like the cat sat on the box, the word sat might pay attention to cat to understand who is actually performing the action. But that's learned through many layers. After iterations, this is how a transformer learns. But something interesting here is that the model, a transformer, is learning through multiple attention heads. So remember, before we said self-attention and attention, but something that is a new probably concept for you is multiple attention heads. I told you that in every layer we are learning different things about a sentence, but who is actually performing these tasks are the multiple attention heads. So each head is going to specialize in a different behaviors. Let's say one head is going to learn about a syntax, and many others will learn about how to copy previous tokens, and so on. So why this matters for interpretability? we focus on attention heads in mechanistic interpretability. And MLPs as well. Attention heads will give us the layers to focus on, and MLPs will give us the neurons to focus on. So once we understand what a transformer is doing and how it's composed, now we can talk about the tools or the techniques that we can use to hack and modify the behavior of an LLM. So these are, I'm going to show you just 5 of them, but I'm sure there are a couple more out there. These are the tools we use to hack the LLMs, to understand not just what they output, but why and how they compute it. So the first technique is called activation patching. And activation is just a vector that will has, of course, many numbers. And these numbers will contain basically the importance that every word has in a sentence. That's an activation. So let's say that you have 2 sentences, 2 prompts. The first one is, the Colosseum is in Rome. And the second sentence, or sentence B, is the Eiffel Tower is in Paris. So if you want to understand how important are these activations in a certain layer, you can swap them. And if the sentence B outputs Rome, that means that that specific layer contains relevant information. So that's how you understand in which layer are happening or are more relevant information has been encoded. Activation patching is showing something called causal responsibility. So if I find the layer that contains information about countries or landmarks, then I might be able to modify this layer to perform a different output. The second technique is called ablation, and that's basically turning off neurons or heads. Again, before we talk about the architecture of a transformer, and we define that we have the self-attention where basically we find the layers, and the neurons, thanks to the MLP or the feed-forward network, we define how important are those neurons. With ablation, what we are doing is removing these neurons. Why do we want to do that? Basically, if we remove a neuron and let's say we are not able to predict properly the next token, that means that that neuron was important. So mechanistic interpretability is basically running experiments to understand how neurons work. So this is useful to find which head in a specific layer leaks private data, for example, or confidential data. Remember that ChatGPT or all the LLMs have been trained with public data, and many users, not us, of course, we hard-code passwords and tokens in our code. So this is one of the techniques that big companies use to remove this sensitive data from the corpora. The next tool is called probing. And probing is just basically classification. So again, if you come from machine learning, then you will remember that you will train those classifiers to understand when something happens and when something does not happen. So again, here in probing, we want to understand what each layer is doing. So let's say that we want to understand if we should be predicting the next word as a noun or as a verb. So how does the model know here that he filled the pool with water is a noun, and for the next sentence, don't forget to water the plants. That water means or is a verb and not a noun. So if we want to understand in which layer we can define that a word is a noun or a verb, we train a classifier to do so. This is a very interesting case, but it's not scalable, just because you will have to label a lot of neurons and data. So this is supervised, a supervised technique will require manual labor from researchers to just train one proven or one classifier. The next technique and the last one is the attention or the logit length. So attention is basically showing which tokens ahead is focusing on. And why is this important? Because we want to know what each layer thinks to the next token, which next token might possibly be the next one. So this is useful for hypothesis generation. Let's say we want to find neurons or layers that might be predicting an answer for something. I will say all these techniques can be used through very well-known library called Transformer Lens. The creator of Transformer Lens is Neil Nanda. He was a researcher at Anthropic, and then he moved to DeepMind. But basically, this Transformer Lens is one of the first tools for researchers, for engineers to understand how a neural network or an LLM works. So how do I put together everything and understand how to interpret the LLMs? So all these tools are just models. So you can go from one to the other one and use them to confirm one of your hypotheses. So you start, let's say, for example, thinking I want to confirm if this layer is doing A. So I'm going to start first using ablation. I'm going to remove some neurons and see what happens. So you, of course, as a researcher, you will put down some notes and say, OK, if I remove this neuron, nothing changes, nothing happened, or maybe something else is happening, but not what I wanted to see. So doing mechanistic interpretability is very experimental, but it's a bit rewarding when you focus on something very specific like security. So when do we use mechanistic interpretability? Not just to understand how LLMs work, but to also make them useful for use cases like security. Again, we mentioned before that we can find some PII data in training data, but also we can jailbreak Gemini, ChatGPT to provide us some tokens. So that's when we use mechanistic interpretability. We want to prompt engineer maybe something, confirm our hypothesis through one of these tools, ablation, proving, maybe training a classifier, and then running some lens, using transformer lens. We want to create some logits and see what's happening. But the main use, one of the main uses is to help LLMs to make them safer. Again, I'm just enthusiast. I've been doing this by my own. So hopefully, I can spark some of your interest in this domain. I know it's a huge domain and a huge area. But I just wanted to give you an introduction what mechanistic interpretability is and what tools are outside. To be honest, for engineers, there aren't many tools or many libraries that we can use to hack or understand what an LLM is doing. So that's why we need more Python developers to actually create these tools for everyone to understand, make LLMs and responses and behavior safer. These are just a few resources that you might find interesting if you are interested in mechanistic interpretability. There are no constraints to join a community. What I'm saying is that you don't need to be a PhD or a master, have a master degree. If you know about neural networks, how they work, and then you are interested in this domain, I would recommend you to join one of the Blue Dot courses. It's completely free. If you're based in London, then you have Arena, which is a boot camp, usually in person. And there are many resources online that are good as well, and will give you the opportunity to just start doing something. And yeah, thank you so much for coming. I hope this was useful.
Thank you so much. And the blue box has just started acquiring some colors. So, questions? Are there any? Mm-hmm.
Oh, thank you for the presentation. I was curious about when you do probing on a very big neural network, like I guess it's not manual, right? So how does it work concretely when you want to activate or deactivate like a specific layer, like among like millions of parameters?
So there is a small disclaimer there. So all these tools, they work pretty well with small models, small calling 2 billion parameters. But for big models, it's pretty difficult to do what you just mentioned. So I will recommend you to start with the Gemma models if you want. I know it's very small, but you also need a lot of compute to do these experiments. So that's why you will start first with Gemma, GPT-2, and then extrapolate these results to bigger ones. So the main constraint is actually having the compute to do this research. That's also, actually, I told you that there are no constraints, or there are no, like, you can just join a community and do research, but actually it's very, very difficult to get a compute to do this. So if you start with the small models, so I just started just experimenting with Gemma models. They will have, if you are running experiments with sparse autoencoders, for example, you will find the weights, the ledgers already published, so you can just start using them and understanding which neuron gets activated when you run a prompt and analyze them. But I would recommend you to start with smaller models, or you can train just your own model, few million of parameters, and then see how it performs.
I have a question as well. You mentioned you need a hypothesis in the first place in order to use these techniques. How do you go about having that hypothesis in the beginning?
Yes, that's why I joined the groups. Because, so a hypothesis might come from papers, reading papers. For me, it was very difficult to come with just an idea of, I'm going to do this in mechanistic interpretability, so I just started reading papers and see what the next steps were. For example, I think in May, in March, I joined a group called SPAR, and they will provide you with a mentor that comes with ideas because they have been working in research. And I actually asked the same question, like, how do you come with these ideas? How are you so smart? And I can't do this. I can code, but I can't just come up with an idea. And he mentioned that you should start with small problems. Like, let's say, one of the questions might be how or which neurons get activated when a model, let's say GPT-O mini, the O3 mini, says, let me think about it. Or it backtracks and say, oh, actually, I'm wrong. Or maybe this is not the solution. When you read the whole thinking process, you will find many of these keywords in the reasoning. And that was one of the questions they have, like, what does a model, how does a neuron gets activated to just output this token? So my recommendation as an engineer could be, if you can just join communities where there is a mix of scientists and engineers, research engineers, it's more likely that they have these ideas, but they don't have time. So that's also my journey. I will read papers. Something that is being in my backlog is to understand how a jailbreak prompt actually works. Just because for me it's interesting to see what the model thinks when it reads a jailbreaking prompt. I would say just reading prompts, papers, and see what the future work or next steps are for them. It's the easiest way.
Thank you.
And the last brief one.
Hi. Do you know to what extent these sort of concepts in the models tend to be localized to like a single neuron versus being distributed across many?
So your question is?
Do you know, like, to what extent do we know yet whether these concepts tend to be localized to a single neuron or whether they tend to be distributed across a wider
Yeah,
range?
so there is a theory from Anthropic saying that it's very difficult for a neuron to just hold information about one specific topic. So that's called monosemanticity, and basically says it's very difficult for a neuron to just have knowledge on A. It actually holds information about other topics, but in a different level. So could be, it's actually part of what probing is doing. It's very difficult to just isolate specific neurons because they will have more information. but it actually depends also on how you train the classifier. I haven't seen in any paper yet, I haven't read them all, but I haven't found like specific neurons for a specific topic. It's more likely that you will find like a layer or a set of them instead of just specific neurons.
Oh, thanks.
All right, so let's say thanks to Jenny and continue discussion over lunch.